Welcome to today's Lunch and Learned brought to you by YMCA Employment and Immigrant Services of Niagara. My name is Mishka Balsama and I will be your host today. Management ethics and trickle-down theory, a topic that could not be more relevant. Research shows that more than 70% of employees say that the behavior of their direct leader is the strongest influence on the ethical climate of their workplace. Other studies tell us that organizations with strong ethical leadership have higher retention, stronger performance, and more resilient teams. Values, fairness, and transparency flows through an organization from the top, shaping how people treat one another and how decisions are actually being made. Today, guided by the insights and expertise of Marina Butler, President at Employment Professionals Canada, we will explore what ethical leadership looks like in practice and how each of us, regardless of our roles, can contribute to a healthier and more principled workplace. So I thank you all again for being here with us today. I hope this session actually offers you insight that supports both your leadership and your teams at the same time. Just on a practical note, if you wish to enable live transcript, you can find that option on your Zoom screen. The session is recorded and will be made available afterwards. If you, during the time of the session, run into any technical difficulties, just let us know and utilize the chat function or email us directly. We're here to answer your questions. But before we begin, I want to highlight our partner. This Lunch and Learn session is proudly brought to you by YMCA Employment and Immigrant Services of Niagara, a steadfast partner in our sessions. Their support is invaluable, offering employment programs that assist job seekers at all levels and providing extensive employment services for employers. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Marina Butler, President and Growth Strategist at Employment Professionals Canada. She is one of only 3 independent Canadian businesswomen recognized by Forbes Canada across all 3 national recruitment categories: professional recruiting, temporary staffing, and executive searches. Her company is also a 2-time Consumer Choice Award recipient. With more than 3 decades of supporting organizations across Niagara, Canada, and the United States, Marina brings a rare combination of experience, insight, and forward-thinking leadership. She began her career as a journalist, a role that sharpened her ability to listen deeply, ask meaningful questions, and understand what is happening beneath the surface. Today, she applies that same curiosity and clarity to the world of employment, HR, and workplace culture, helping organizations strengthen communication, align teams, build healthier and more ethical management practices. Marina, we're so happy to have you with us. And just on the question of today's format, we're going to start out with a presentation given by Marina, and then following that, we will have our Q&A session with committed to answering all of your questions. To forward your questions, some of you have already sent us some in advance of it, this session today, but you can also utilize the chat function and I will monitor it throughout and we're committed as always to getting to all of them. So on that note, Marina, it is now my great pleasure to move this webinar over to you and then we'll reconnect for the Q&A session.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mishka. I appreciate it. I'd like to welcome everyone. Before we begin, I want to thank the GNCC for hosting this Lunch and Learn and the YMCA of Niagara for sponsoring today's session. If questions come up at any point during or after the presentation, you're welcome to email me directly at marina@employmentprofessionals.com. I always enjoy hearing your thoughts and supporting your desire to learn. If you're interested in taking a deeper look at your own workplace environment, I also offer a mini workplace culture audit. Just send me an email and I'll share the tool along with clear instructions on how to complete and interpret it. Throughout today's session, we'll have a few interactive elements with mini polls to help you reflect on your own experiences. And while we're not able to run breakout sessions today, I do have a management ethics and trickle-down theory worksheet that you can use with your own teams to facilitate meaningful discussions. If you'd like a copy, I'd be happy to send it to you. In this session, we'll explore a brief history of management ethics, how leadership behaviors have influenced employees in the past, what ethical management looks like in today's working environments, and what we can expect as we move into the future of work. So let's just take a moment to walk through how management ethics have evolved over the past century. In the early industrial era, roughly 1900s to 1950s, ethics wasn't something companies talked about formally. The focus was productivity, efficiency, and maintaining a strict hierarchy. Leaders made decisions unilaterally, and employees were expected to follow them without question. Integrity was assumed, but it wasn't taught. But by the 1950s through the 1970s, the human relations movement emerged, and ideas like morale, motivation, and job satisfaction gained traction. Thinkers like Maslow and Drucker began emphasizing that leaders had responsibilities not just for output, but for the well-being of their people. And ethics became part of what good management meant. Then in the 1980s and 1990s, a number of corporate scandals forced organizations to rethink leadership behavior. This brought on the concept of tone at the top. Companies realized that unethical behavior didn't happen in isolation. It cascaded from leadership. That's when the trickle-down theory originally was an economic idea. It was repurposed in leadership so that leaders would do and people would replicate. But if you fast forward to the 2000s and today, the evolution continues. But modern ethical leadership focuses on trust, transparency, psychological safety, and authenticity. Leaders are expected to model values consistently, and now we know that culture spreads more through relationships and social learning than through memos or policies. Today's model is less about a top-down flow and more about the ripple effect, where every leader at every level creates waves that shape the culture, small intentional actions that have a large and lasting impact. So when we talk about ethical leadership today, we're not talking about compliance checkboxes or formal codes of conduct. We're talking about the lived experience of people in the workplace. Do they feel safe? Do they feel supported? And do they feel informed and respected? It's an ideal form that involves transparency, consistency, and trust that cascades from senior leaders down through supervisors and into everyday interactions with employees. It looks like accountability. It's paired with psychological safety, and it means removing friction so people can do their best work, focusing on fairness, respect, inclusion, and adaptability. And it's built through small, steady, intentional improvements. You'll hear that theme a lot throughout this presentation. Before we look at the reality, I'd like to hear from you. Which of these ethical leadership behaviors is most important to you personally? Your response to this poll is going to help everyone understand what people value most when it comes to leadership. So if you can take a minute to do that now, it would be great. Okay, that's very interesting. So you almost have a split in terms of the ethical leadership and the psychological safety. That's very interesting because throughout the presentation, you're going to notice that there is a lot of commonality with those two thoughts. I think we can all appreciate that the reality of what is actually happening in today's workplace is more complex and that many leaders are so exhausted. The employees are exhausted, the supervisors are exhausted. It starts from the top and ends at the bottom. And people right now are feeling stretched thin. The pace of change is relentless, as you know, and supervisors often feel caught in the middle of the top and the employees. So it can feel a little bit confusing, and supervisors can also feel left out of the loop. It's important to note that leaders want to be ethical and supportive, but they're overwhelmed And supervisors do want to help, but they lack the guidance and the clarity to know where and when to step in. The employees want to engage, but then again, they're dealing with burnout and mixed messages as well. This is when communication often breaks down and trust is eroded. It's the best policies that we can offer work hard at developing what we want in the workplace, but they don't always translate into a lived culture. And that's something that we have to appreciate as we move forward in trying to get our organizations to grow and cultures to align. I have another poll for you, and I'd like to check in with you to challenge you to decide on what feels most familiar in your workplace right now. Where is the human side of the disconnect that is most strongly felt? So, absence of clarity and direction, fear-based communication, lack of psychological safety seems to be a running theme with fear-based communication. That's very interesting. C, absence of clarity and direction. Okay. Most of these are what people are experiencing at oops, sorry, I was looking at the wrong one. Sorry. Oh my gosh, I was looking at that poll that snapped up there. I apologize. I'm going to just X out of that. And communication gaps, I apologize. Limited trust or weak follow through from leadership and fear of speaking up or sharing concerns. Those are legitimate challenges for most companies and most employees in any industry that you can walk into. So there's a very human gap between the ideal of ethical leadership and what people are actually experiencing. And it's not because people don't care, it's because the systems and channels of support haven't kept up with the realities of modern work. So our opportunity is to close this gap with small, meaningful shifts, small intentional change in behavior, communication that, when repeated over time, creates a significant positive impact on culture and performance. You need to be purposeful about clearer communication and have more honest conversations with your team, and be intentional about trust building and decisions that reduce friction instead of adding to it. The bottom line is that ethical leadership today isn't about perfection. It's about intention. It's about showing up consistently, even in uncertainty, and modeling the behaviors we want to see ripple throughout the organization. For many years, culture was treated as a soft concept, something nice to have, something HR looked after, something written on a wall. But in today's world, that thinking is a bit outdated. Still needed, but a bit outdated. Culture has become more of an economic strategy. It influences who we attract, who we keep, how quickly we can adapt, and how well we perform, especially during periods of rapid change. AI disruption and talent shortages are important in change structure. I think it's really important to understand that culture is more of an operating system of the organization because it shapes every decision, every workflow, and every outcome. And it it is a matter of course when trust increases. We don't just see people feeling better, we see measurable changes in the outcomes. And this is why we say culture and ethical leadership are not soft concepts. They directly influence the numbers that matter most to business. In the world that we're operating in, rapid change, hybrid work, AI disruption, and constant regulatory shifts are experienced every day in every industry. So communication can't be a soft skill, it has to be foundational. And when leadership communicates clearly and consistently, it builds up trust. People need to understand the why, not just the what. And when communication becomes fragmented or delayed or overly top down, culture suffers immediately. Employees tell us that they feel disconnected when decisions aren't explained or when they receive mixed messages at the same time. Leaders are burning out trying to manage too many channels, too many updates, and too much change. The result is a workplace where teams react to information rather than aligning around it. Think about communication as the bridge to strategy, culture, and execution. When that bridge has cracks, unclear handoffs, solid teams, incomplete information, and siloed teams, things fall through the crack. Those solid teams become fractured. But when the bridge is strong, the teams move with clarity, speed, and purpose. And here's a reflection worth holding on to. Are we communicating with our people or simply communicating to them? Are we reducing that friction or are we adding to it? Because communication isn't just what leaders say, it's how people experience direction, clarity, and support. And it directly shapes how they respond, adapt, and perform. I want to give you a couple of minutes to read this email. It's a real world email that went viral and sparked a lot of reactions around the world. I don't know if you've seen this email or not, but it's very, very interesting. I'd like you to pay attention on how this message lands, what emotions or reactions it triggers, what it communicates intentionally and unintentionally, and how it connects to the themes we've been exploring: communication, trust, culture, leadership, behaviors, and the future of work. This email is powerful. It's an example of how tone, clarity, and emotional intelligence shapes the impact of leadership and communication, especially when discussing something as big as AI and job security, which, if you were to take a poll within your own environment, you would know that there's a lot of fear surrounding the future of work and what AI will mean to everybody. When you're finished reading it, just let me know in the chat. And once everybody is ready, we'll explore the implications and lessons we can draw from this message. If you'd like a copy of that CEO email for your own workshop internally, I can certainly send that to you so that you can utilize it. But I think most people will agree that anxiety and fear is the primary factor that was experienced by the readers of the Fever environment and those of us that read it when we saw it on social media. And the whole purpose of giving you this exercise is not to judge the CEO. We're here as individuals to understand the impact, the risks, and the lessons, because AI disruption is real. And how we talk about it determines whether people will panic or participate within your own work environments. So, what I'd like you to do about this type of communication and how it shows up in your workplace is how you would create a communication piece and engage your own employees to make sure that there is alignment rather than confusion. Um, I'd like to ask you to take this poll now. Um, What is the biggest leadership risk shown in the email? Okay. The majority of you chose fear-based communication, followed by creating unnecessary urgency, panic, and the lack of psychological safety. All three excellent picks. It is very true. So we're going to learn what the viral CEO email teaches us about leadership. And remember, when we analyze messages like this, we're not, again, critiquing the leaders that are sending out these types of messages. We need to extract those lessons and how communication is important to the reader, as well as why. The key lesson would be why and what is the messaging. Urgency without clarity tends to create fear and not alignment. So, candor without empathy lands as a threat and not support. Messages about AI demand stability, context, and direction. Otherwise, people fill the gaps with anxiety. And strong leaders, they communicate change in a way that builds psychological safety, not panic. They pair the honesty with care and urgency with clarity. They show employees where we're going, not just what we should be afraid of. These lessons help us create communication that moves people forward and not freeze them into paralyzing fear. It's important to know that ethical AI leadership is not about pretending disruption isn't real. It's about guiding people through it with clarity and care. So employees want honesty, but they also want reassurance, direction, and support. So what exactly does that mean? It means that the focus should be on context and not catastrophizing, sorry. They build psychological safety by showing that AI is something we've learned together, not something employees should fear alone. It's about balancing candor with humanity and making sure people feel secure, that they're supported and included in the future that we're building. Here's the hard truth. Culture doesn't begin at the front line, it cascades from leadership, level by level. And people don't copy what leaders intend, they copy what leaders perform. So the tone, urgency, fear, frustration, inconsistency, all of that trickles down through supervisors and lands on the employees' shoulders. And that is why ethical messaging isn't just a nice idea, it's really a necessity. Because if leaders send messages that create fear, whether they realize it or not, the fear spreads fast. And once it takes hold, it becomes cultural, it becomes normal. But on the other hand, when leaders model stability, clarity, and support, employees will mirror that too. And that becomes culture as well. So understanding the trickle-down effect is essential for building a workplace where people can adapt, experiment, and thrive, particularly in times of uncertainty. We all know this. AI isn't a future trend. It's a present reality reshaping work faster than any technology in history. But here's the deeper truth. AI disruption is not just technical, it's cultural. Teams need that psychological safety, clarity, and support as their work evolves. Leaders need to communicate more and not less. And organizations that embrace small shifts will see steady improvements and will pull ahead rapidly. AI will not replace people, but people who know how to use AI will absolutely outpace those who don't. And our job is to prepare employees for that reality with empathy, strategy, and intentional leadership. In one 2025 global study by KPMG and the University of Melbourne, found that 57% of workers hide their use of AI from employers. 48% upload company data into public AI tools, and 56% have made AI-related work errors, often without proper training or guidance. The way leaders use AI sets the emotional and behavioral tone for every layer of the company. If leaders use AI fearfully, sloppily, or sporadically, that behavior will trickle down. But if they use AI ethically, responsibly, and openly, that behavior will ripple upward. Reflexive AI means AI becomes a natural extension of critical thinking, not a gimmick, not a threat, but a tool within your company. And reflexive doesn't mean careless, it means transparent, responsible, policy aligned, and legally compliant. Future ready Organizations are built on the integration of compliance, ethics, communication, culture, and AI capability. But AI shapes tasks. Leadership. Leadership shapes the culture around it, and that's very important to take note of. Let's just shift our lens into the legal territory because the future of work isn't only about culture and leadership, it's increasingly shaped by law. We're entering one of the most transformative legal periods in the last 20 years. Employment, labor, privacy, and human rights legislation are evolving rapidly to address three realities: AI in the workplace, hybrid and remote work, rising expectations for psychological safety, fairness, and transparency. First, we're seeing stronger protections under human rights and employment law. That's including expanding definitions of harassment, psychological and psychosocial risk, and mental health related obligations. There is also more scrutiny on workplace investigations and on the fairness of employment decisions. Second, AI regulation is accelerating. Ontario's Working for Workers 4 Act will require employers to disclose if AI is used in hiring decisions. Federally, the proposed Artificial Intelligence and Data Act will introduce obligations for organizations using high impact systems, especially in recruitment, evaluation, and termination. Employers are going to need to understand how their AI tools make decisions and ensure that bias, mitigation, transparency, and explainability are built in. Third, hybrid and remote models come with new standards. Right to disconnect policies are going to be enforced and expanded. Digital health and safety, ergonomic obligations, and multi-provincial compliance will have to be relooked at. Finally, we're seeing legislation around sustainable jobs, climate disclosure, and skills mobility, all of which affect workforce planning. So here's the bottom line. Legal compliance, is not a minimum threshold anymore. It's an ethical responsibility. And through the trickle-down effect, leadership behavior determines whether compliance becomes part of culture or simply a checkbox. The organizations that succeed in the future of work will be legally aware, ethically grounded, transparent, and technologically prepared. Before we close, let's bring everything together. Today, we explored how leadership behaviors cascade through organizations, how culture drives performance, and how communication shapes trust. We saw how AI amplifies whatever culture already exists, and why ethical leadership is the foundation of future-ready workplaces. We also looked at the legal landscape, which is becoming more demanding, more transparent, and more intertwined with leadership practice. So here's what you need to know. None of these themes exist in isolation. Leadership, culture, communication, AI adoption, and legal compliance now operate as one interconnected ecosystem. And the organizations that thrive in the next 5 years will be the ones that approach these elements with intentionality, empathy, and strategic clarity, one intentional degree at a time. I want to thank you for investing your time and your attention and your curiosity today. I encourage you to think about one or two small shifts that you can take back to your workplace immediately. It might be a communication habit, a leadership behavior, or an approach to AI that you want to model. If you'd like the mini culture audit and the worksheet, or if you want to continue this conversation at the team or organizational level, please reach out. I'm always happy to support you. The future of work is changing quickly, but with ethical leadership, intentional culture, and clear communication, we can navigate it together. Thank you again. It's been a pleasure working with you today.
Marina, thank you so very much actually for this amazing presentation. I so deeply appreciated the way you laid it out and really set the foundation for this conversation that we're about to have. I can see through the chat there's a number of questions that have come in and a number of questions that I'd mentioned earlier that had also been already pre-submitted. So I think we're going to have a really, really good dialogue about this. So one of the questions that had come in is the question of how can one tell if the trickle-down approach to culture is actually working? I know we often look at performance indicators that we have. We can look at turnover of staff. We can look at other areas of it. But I think so many people in leadership and even people on teams maybe don't have a really clear sense, is this actually working the way we are approaching it? And I was wondering if you have some answers to kind of key elements that we need to keep our eyes on, that we maybe possibly can measure, or that we can have a way that we can feel the pulse of the culture.
Yes, for sure. That's an excellent question. And frontline decisions always look and feel like what leaders describe as pause for safety concerns. So if you're looking for behavioral consistency, it's really important to put some psychological safety indicators in place. And you can do that very easily by providing focus groups within your own environment or creating employee surveys so that you can gather the information that you need to develop, a, a, I guess, a method to offer employees to raise their concerns when they make mistakes or ask for help without fear of humiliation or retaliation. And that only happens with open discussion and questions within your meetings. So when you ask people at different levels what matters to you or what matters in a situation within your work environment, it's really important to let them express and speak up so that you can take a look at what are the internal issues within your own environment and how can I investigate what's happening and communicate back what we need to do. But there are specific signs of what's not working and is there a mismatch within our environment? And that you can quickly define as, what do I say to do? And where's the gap where the reality is that the teams are quietly ignoring not only your official policies, but your direction? And is it because, there's silence on the part of leadership where they are so busy they have to ignore it or put it off until it actually becomes a surprising crisis. And that's when, you experience lawsuits or regulatory visits from the MOL that come in because there's just poor channels and people have that fear of reprisal.
Yeah. When we talk about this, and we often talk about values within organizations, and one of the things we have seen that our values, the values of organizations, often are reflected, stated in our strategic plans, sometimes stated on our websites, and in some cases, people also promoted through job postings they have and others. How loud is one meant to get about ethical leadership? And is that a real sensitive issue when we say it, when in the end, likely a team and every person in the organization is the one who determines if it is ethical leadership?
That's really interesting because a lot of people I find are fearful about being honest in their communication because they're afraid of being held responsible. And because we live in a society at the moment where everything can be triggered into bringing you to human rights or challenged in a court of law, makes it difficult for leaders to really be purposeful in their statements. But I think that there's a workaround. I think that when you are very open about what is happening in your environment and how you're communicating to your employees and to the general public or to the stakeholders that are involved in your organization, it becomes very defined in terms of the fact that employees embrace rather than challenge. And I think the stakeholders do that as well and recognize the fact that people are trying to be as transparent as they possibly can under the circumstance. And they align to that and create an atmosphere that's cherished by all.
Yeah, I think that is a good indicator. I think that you mentioned that. And to what degree do people actually embrace that which is taking place? And we often have a good sense of it. One of our participants today is asking the question, it's kind of a really good follow-up question to the conversation that we're having. They're asking, what are some of the values that should be adopted by a business to promote an ethical and healthy culture? So it's again the sense of now, if we are talking ethical leadership, what are some of the values
Yeah,
that are linked to it?
yeah. I think you know, it just boils down to putting up some guardrails and inviting people into co-design what we need to do. So, I think that when we're looking at systems or habits that make it easier for ideas to flow upward, I think asking and making sure that the leaders publicly commit to their employees and to their group and just help them to understand what the ethics are and that they're in a safe environment. I think it goes to also designing an inclusive and equitable environment so that people can see that the decision making is going to be one that's going to assist in the growth of their own employment situation and that of the company.
Yeah. I always think transparency is something else too, is that people are involved in how the decisions have been made and
Yeah.
what are the guiding principle behind it, so that people can say, I can see myself in that. I can see how the decision has been made. And this there's a similar question here, and what are the specific ethical behaviors that are required at all levels of leadership within an organization? And again, it comes back to values, and this time it looks at like behaviors. And I know that you've spoken so eloquently about the communication, the critical element of how we communicate, how regular, frequently, what forms we utilize to communicate. Anything else when it comes to ethical behavior?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? You hit everything right on the nail there. Leader behavior is so important because people watch what leaders do and especially in ambiguous or high stakes situations. There's a really good example. Satya Nadella from Microsoft was one of the strongest mindsets that reframed Microsoft's culture, and she did that around empathy and encouraging learning, collaboration, the psychological safety, and it really revitalized performance and innovation at Microsoft. And also at Unilever, there was a CEO. I'm not sure if he's still with them or not, but Paul Pullman. He doubled its market cap by tying in strategy to a sustainable living plan. But what he did was he took a net positive idea and he had the employees share in terms of a pattern with respect to personal accountability and stakeholder orientation and that deliberate culture shaping, even when it was costly and uncomfortable for the organization. So I say that, people are looking at what gets rewarded and what gets punished. So if you're recognizing people, recognize them for the right things and don't reshape rules to benefit management. Reshape those real rules in real life to benefit all of the organization and all of the individuals that work within that. And so I think once you start to do that, the culture will follow. And ultimately, it's going to become uniform across the company where culture change is going to be the primary asset of that organization. And they'll see that ripple effect in their bottom line as well.
Yeah, I think that is really well done. I think it's always good for organizations to recognize who are all the stakeholders.
Yes.
And so that they are the people we report to. There could be boards of directors, there could be management team, could be the complete team, all the staff that's there. But to some degree, there's also the customers and the partners and the others. It's really understanding, I think, the complexity of who is involved in the decisions that are being made, that actually I think shows, because I think in many ways ethics shows outside of our organization too. They show who we are and who people think we are, and if they trust us. And I always say trust is the one that determines how quickly relationships and partnerships move forward. I think it's fundamental to it. One of the questions here is also around difficult decision makings. And I think ethics shows when difficulty shows up. Ethics
Yeah.
shows when problems show up. When everything goes well, we are just us. We have no element of stress, and we likely all will be well. But if they are faced, as teams, individuals are faced with making difficult decisions that they encounter, what role does ethics play with? How should people make decisions when they encounter difficult situations to ensure that they have checked to make sure that all our ethical values and behaviors are being met at the same time? We don't leave them at the door because maybe we're frightened about what difficulty we are facing.
Yeah. It's the humanity of it all, isn't it? It really is. And one thing that we learned in journalism school is that you have to ask the five W's, who is it going to affect? Why are we doing this? What is the outcome that we're seeking? And again, why are we seeking it? Is it going to be a benefit to us? Is it going to be a negative impact? And who is it going to negatively affect? And how do we circumvent that negativity, or how do we harness it to pull out all the benefits in order to be able to A, be compliant, and B, develop a culture that's going to embrace the new change or the minor shifts that we are going to make to ultimately get to that big change in the end. And I think one of the biggest questions that you have to ask yourself is, how do we get there?
Yeah.
And what is that going to involve? And who is going to be involved in that? And I think once you determine what that is and you set a chart for yourself, that direction will ultimately lead to where you want to end up.
Yeah, I think it is really good to have that in mind sometimes, and because some people have always said, think about the ideal that you want in this situation, the ideal outcome or the ideal what it is. And I think the ideal often is based on our values that we have and that what we want to see. But how do we get to it? How do we create that if that's what we're looking for? And I think when we have that in mind, I think difficult situations take on a different challenge actually for us as we're looking forward. So I think it's really good. Can staff always be brought on board when it comes to cultural change? And I'm thinking about when you have often C-level, C-suite level change, there could be a change overall in culture or expectations that is being brought forward. But can staff always be brought on board when it comes to culture shifts, or are there going to be some who won't and they can't be brought on board? And what do we do with those individuals who maybe just won't buy into it?
Yeah, I'd like to say in the perfect world, everybody's going to buy into everything that we do. But the reality is that you're not going to get everyone to come along for the ride. And, some individual values or habits are really kind of incompatible with the new direction. So you'll need to, as leaders, I guess, clarify what the new expectations are. And then you're going to have to make some of them non-negotiables, especially when it becomes bad behavior within the workplace or negative outcomes that may be produced if they don't change their expectations. One of the most meaningful things that you can do is as you're implementing, if you do them in small steps, sometimes you can't, you have to take one thing and do one giant leap. But you need to design some coaching and training and give them some time to adjust. And as long, I think, as you make the process fair, um, give them clear standards, allow them to give you feedback and respect that feedback. Ultimately, you're going to get to where you need to do. But I think that it has to lead to culture carriers. So, who are those carriers going to be? Normally, they're the middle managers. And while they are busy with multitasking, they really need to be coached and equipped to help them carry out the skills that they need to trickle it down to everybody else. And you have to hold them accountable because they're the ones that are going to help you change that culture and to make sure that people who don't buy in understand why the change has to occur.
Yeah, that makes sense. In part of your presentation, you also spoke about a future-looking kind of strategy initiatives that we have. We all have our eyes on AI and a number of other monitoring tools that are in place for us. How do you think? And you talked about the impact of AI and the role that it has, and the email,
Yeah.
devastating email that came out, but. Is AI and monitoring tools, can they change the way we deal with ethics at work? Do they have
Yes.
a role? And can you expand on that a little bit?
Yes, I definitely that it can help you. It's one of those environments where, first of all, two things. I mentioned in the presentation that basically it's going to change the way that we work in terms of there will be job losses, but it will reinvent more jobs. And I think what will happen is that AI will help us to think faster. It will course correct us if we understand how to learn prompt engineering. And that's going to be a key differentiator. I think once we understand how we can work with AI and bring it into and help us develop those ethical guidelines and momentum that we want to instill in all of our employees, we have to understand that we have to teach that to everybody and not just ourselves, and understand that they know what the value systems are and what can be detrimental with the usage of AI, but also give it a prompt that says that everything has to be open in communication and ethical guiding so that it doesn't land on a lawyer's desk eventually. One of the other things that I think is really important is that cybersecurity is going to be a risk, and that happens when we misuse AI as well. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that there's going to be a lot of different things that we have to take into consideration, but understanding how we deliver, how we utilize it, and how we gain knowledge by it is going to be a determining factor on how ethical we communicate and become in our behaviors.
and how confident we become actually in also utilizing these monitoring tools, because I think that is a key part of it. And on the note of cybersecurity, we so regularly hold lunch and learns and educational seminars just around this particular topic, because it has an impact not only on the big companies, which we see in the headlines and we hear the stories, the tragic stories there, but also now so many smaller and mid-sized companies. But when we're looking and talking about monitoring tools, when we talk about technology, we're talking about we're again looking at what does the future look like, and what parts of culture building do you think will matter most in the next few years? You spoke about early on in your presentation, and I think you started it out to saying, like, here's the style that was acceptable at these times, and this was the culture that went with it. If you now look 5-10 years down the road, and you're looking at the workforce that is coming into place, which has its own challenges in some ways too. What are the culture building do you think we need? What are some of the values that we need to bring forward to really be the workplace for the next generation of people and reflect the values that are likely coming forward?
So, currently we live in the era where anti-bias is very popular, and anti-discrimination, inclusion, diversity, that's only going to get stronger as we go along. Um, there's going to be some bad actors out there, but we have to hold strong in the belief system that what we're doing currently is going to be beneficial for us in the long run. And the push is environmental safety. And that environmental safety doesn't just include your organization environment, it ripples out to real world habitat. And you'll notice that there's a inclination by the younger generation that are coming into the workplace that are looking at things that are most important to their future and the future of their children. But simultaneously, you have generational individuals at my level and in between where we're also concerned about that. And that's our focus for the future, because we're now getting into the grandchildren set, or we want to leave a great environment for animals. If you're an animal lover, it doesn't matter what your belief system is in terms of that. The focus is going to be, how do we make this world better? And how do we continue that throughout the course of that change within the next 5, 10, 15 years? Look, there's going to be a big disruption in what we do now and what jobs we hold. I mean, journalists are going to be out. Taxi drivers are going to be out. Truck drivers are going to be out. And they're going to be replaced. But those replacements come with a whole new set of skills for individuals to capitalize on. And there was a dialogue within different conference settings where they're estimating 90,000 job losses to 100, and I think it was 150,000 new jobs that are going to be, if not more than that, into the millions. So I think that there are some positive things, but there are some risks that we have to take a look at as well. And I think that we just have to continue through and do what we need to do best, and that's to make sure that humanity is always number one and that we can survive moving forward.
Yeah. And when we look at history, we have seen changes from over
Yes.
the years and over the decades, and it only has created more opportunities and work and job opportunities for individuals at the same time.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of the time. We always say we stay within the hour, but that would,
Yes.
and usually what I ask our experts who are on our Lunch and Learn is to ask them if they want to take the last minute or something like to say anything, or if you feel like there's something you might have not conveyed yet, or something you would like to stress for our audience to know, just as your closing comments. I'm passing it over to you, and go from there.
Oh, thank you. Well, you know what? I'm happy to have put this presentation together and to deliver it, and I really appreciate the opportunity to have done that. One thing that my colleague Pamela Durgan and I are doing right now is putting together something that would be available in the first quarter of 2026, and that is free to the attendees. But it is a guideline of the future of work in the next couple of years and what that's going to look like in the Niagara region. And it's based on historicals and what the up and coming models look like. It will identify what job industries will be hit first and what that will look like in every industry and what types of roles will be developed in the next little while. So to get ahead of the jump, I guess, to get a jump start and what your organization needs to be prepared for the future in terms of winding down roles and implementing new ones.
Marina, that sounds fascinating. I think
Thank you.
because even when I look at it, because we hold like the economic summit, we hold small business months, a number of events, and there's so much focus throughout the year on the workforce development that's there, and what the future of Naga looks like in certain sectors. So I'm already eager to get my hands on this report to see what it looks like. So thank you so very much for the work that you and your colleague have done on this. I think it's
You're
really
very
something that
welcome.
is needed here. So thank you for that. And on that note, thank you for all the expertise and insight that you have shared. I personally love this topic. I think it is one that we all need to personally commit to, and teams need to commit to create the culture that we all desire to be in, because we're spending an awful lot of time sometimes at work and with our colleagues, and why not make it the best experience that we can have and the most rewarding one for all of us. So thank you for that. And I also wanted to thank the YMCA of Niagara for their partnership in all of our lunch and learns throughout the year. We could not do it without you. And for our attendees and participants, thank you so very much for tuning in, for staying with us. And if you have any topics that you think we should consider on one of our future lunch and learns, please feel free to contact us. We're at info@gncc.ca, mishka@gncc.ca. Anyone, you know how to get a hold of us. So thank you. And thank you all for joining us, and have a wonderful day.